I love story. Narrative immersion is the fundamental tenet of Zorpazorp, and nothing gets my hobby mojo going more than a mentally themed army rife with conversions, proxies, homebrew army profiles, and a backstory so rich it takes you more time to explain it to your opponent than to play an actual game. Every now and then here on the channel, we dive into the true depths of my hobbyist insanity with a journey of creation, an epic saga of obsession as I take you down my latest army project rabbit hole. Welcome back to the latest episode of the coolest Warhammer army you've never heard of, the Space Marine Edition. Now, as I'm sure you know, here at Zorpazorp we are Emperor's massive balls deep into the Horus Heresy. Earlier this week we launched the most insane Warhammer Narrative Campaign that YouTube has ever seen, and it has only just begun. The utter cinematic madness coming just around the corner is going to blow your minds, and if you've not seen the first episode of the Mark of Calth campaign, get your ass off this video and go and experience the future of wargaming battle reports. This campaign is driven so intensely by narrative and lore and hobby immersion. It features over 50,000 points of models, and every single unit on the battlefield has a name, a backstory, a journey, from the mightiest hero to the humblest grunt. And 4 months ago, as we geared up for filming, I began the journey to build the coolest Space Marine army you've never heard of. Let me introduce the Ultramarines.
What did you say?
Now sit back down. I know you've heard of the Ultramarines, but trust me, you don't know these Ultramarines. These aren't no pansy-ass Smurf Adeptus Astartes, these are Legiones Astartes, the Crusaders of humanity, and even more, these are the most important, badass, well-developed and f***ing super whiz-bang cool Space Marines that have ever worn the cobalt blue of Ultramar, and they are going to change your opinion on probably one of the most hated Space Marine armies of all time. Today is the day that you fall in love with Remus Ventanus, Kyle Celatun, synants, thiel, hutonicus, locus, Barco Vatian, and roboute f***ing guilliman. Don't believe me? Despise the ultra smurfs with every fiber of your being? Or sit down and listen up and roast me in the comments if in 10 minutes time you're not planning the defense of Calth and getting the Ultima tattooed on the inside of your eyelids. So to kick our army off, I managed to score an absolutely unbelievable foundation from one of the Zorpazorp Mournival, Davey, who sold me his old Ultramarine force that he previously bought from Micah Young and Dave Kerr here in the Australian community, totaling over 5,000 points of troops and armored divisions. And when combined with the force I smashed out using the new Age of Darkness box set, this has given me an amazing canvas to tell our story of the Battle of Calth. But now it's time to pour cobalt blue all over that canvas and elevate this force to an insane level of narrative immersion. Dan Abnett's masterpiece Know No Fear is so full of depth and detail, it is just a phenomenal source of inspiration and also a holy bible, or a codex if you will, to guide our creative force, and it is all about the characters. This book is dominated by some amazingly well-developed, nuanced and super recognizable names who have a huge impact on the Mark of Calth campaign and need some truly epic models. This book contains two forces: the ground forces in the thick of the fighting on the planet's surface led by Captain Remus Ventanus, and then up in orbit a kill squad assaulting the traitor-held Zetson Veridyard orbital led by none other than roboute guilliman. Each force has a unique flavor, and we have an incredible wealth of detail on their composition and stylistic features, so it's time to bust out the hobby knife, the bits box, and a whole lot of resin as we dive deep into conversion land. We'll be starting on the kill squad led by Guilliman. This force comprises exactly 46 Marines who survived the teleportation assault from the Macragg's honor, and is comprised of a mix of troops from the absolute elite serving on Guilliman's flagship. Thanks to Davies Hall, I already have a nice mix of suzerains, assault marines, and the new Terminators from the Age of Darkness box set we painted up earlier. We've got a great baseline, but we've got 3 huge characters up here and a very special squad who shall kick kick us off into conversion land. Now, the bread and butter of any close quarters boarding action is breaches. These absolute beasts have huge boarding shields and heavy power armor, perfect for grinding their way through enemy strong points. So to start us off, I've got a box of 5 breaches in Mark III plate and the Ultramarines Praetorian upgrade frames. This gives me 10 shields, a bunch of sexy Gladius power weapons, and a load of sexy Ultima iconography to really make this squad scream the Ultramar's finest. The key to any Ultramarine force being built on Calth is variety. Although in this early period of the Heresy, the Ultramarines were primarily using Mark II and Mark III power armor, there was a scattering of Mark IV for special characters and even some incredibly rare Mark VI. So I'll be combining an additional set of 5 Mark II Marines to give me some extra legs, arms, power packs, and pads to fill out my squad of 10 breaches, as well as some Ultramarines Invictus heads and torsos for extra Ultramar flair. Beyond that, the Battle of Calth is an absolute massacre of betrayal, and all Ultramarines' forces are ravaged, undersupplied, and wounded. Many Marines end up wearing a mix of plate and weapons scavenged from their dead brethren and even from the corpses of the enemy. So I've got a nice mix of bits and pieces to add into all of these conversions to really spice up that flavor. For these breaches, my rule of thumb is that every model must have an Ultramarine specific piece of war gear somewhere. So mixing the Gladius or Praetorian Agrim pattern boarding shields in with the Mark III by doing some hand swaps and giving some of the bigger, heavier shields to the Mark II Invictus torso half of the squad, as well as doing a real mix of shoulder pads across the whole unit, including using the Forge World Ultima upgrade Mark II and Mark IV pads and mixing those in with the standard Mark II and Mark III, and even putting some of the Ultima pads on the left and right shoulders of some models, as if they've scavenged a left Legion pad off a friendly corpse and bolted it onto the wrong shoulder to replace a damaged pauldron. The sergeant of the squad has a super sexy axe, a legatine axe from the Ultramarines upgrade sprue, reposed with a Mark III arm for that iconic "I'm in charge" gesture, and then a nice Invictus helmet and a boarding shield to set him apart. It's important that all of the sergeants have helmets rather than the bare heads, as due to the fact that Vox was so patchy due to Wordbearer's infectious scrap code, the Ultramarine section leaders painted their helmets red for a simple visual cue after Guilliman was inspired by an absolutely awesome character that we'll meet a bit later on called Ayondid Thiel. The remaining breaches feature a couple of special weapons, some real variety in posing, the classic shoot and advance, as well as a bunch of combat poses with the Ultramarines Gladius that required some of the spare arms from the Mark II power weapon sprues, and then I used a couple of standard Mark II helmets as if the Breacher Marines have replaced their helmet from a fallen brother, and then lots and lots of mixed up shoulder pads. I really wanted to zone in on each model telling its own little story. This is a huge focus for me when I'm converting, a real microcosm in the maelstrom of battle. I think my favorite example is this badass Mark II Marine with Praetorian shield and bolt pistol. I wanted him to be firing down at a charging enemy, but he's ran his bolter dry, so he's dropped it onto his maglock on his thigh and whipped up his secondary. So I carved the magazine off the bolter and glued it to the base, and then hollowed out the magwell to really sell it as an empty receiver, and then a nice firing pose really brings the story to life. So happy with that little guy. I'm super happy with the story woven into these poses, and with my modeling skills warmed up, I'm going to dive into some really meaty projects with some of the epic named characters. But up first, it's time to answer a question that has plagued hobbyists since the dawn of time. Magnets, where do I find them? Well, look no further than the magnetbaron.com, your DIY super magnet home. I've been doing loads of magnetization lately for the staggering amount of Horus Heresy vehicles drowning my studio, and super strong magnets designed for wargaming are an absolute god emperor send. The magnetbaron.com have a huge range of wargaming magnets, including specific kits for notoriously difficult to magnetize models, magnetized movement trays, and even magnetized collapsible flight stands for that epic wargaming travel experience. I challenge you to find a better feeling in all of wargaming than the pure bliss of this moment. magnetic perfection. So to score some boss wargaming magnets for all your army needs, hit up the magnabaron.com, link down in the description. And remember guys, support the sponsors that support me. It is killer for the channel, it helps so much. And Constantine from the Magnet Baron is a proper legend
from the Magnetbaron.com.
So definitely go and show him some love. Alright guys, let's get back to the battle. Up first on the menu is a model that is actually going to represent two Ultramarines captains, as they never appear on the battlefield at the same time. Captain Locus, 1st Chapter 9th Company down on the planet's surface, and Captain Hutonicus of the 161st Company as one of the section leaders in Guilliman's kill squad. So naturally, the best place to start for this model is, yep, you guessed it, the character series chapter master Relderon from the Blood Angels. This is an absolutely gorgeous sculpt and represents a classic symptom of Lachie's Horus Heresy obsession. Every time I read a book about a new legion, I want to start an army. And I have boxes and boxes of characters and units from almost every legion scattered through my workshop, and it's time for Relderon to get some use, because I'm never going to make Blood Angels. So the first job is, of course, to carefully carve away all of his Blood Angel insignia. I slipped on the right knee motif and sheared away a heap of the Mark IV studs, but it kind of worked to make them more of an accent rather than all over the entire leg plate. The 9th Legion Roman numerals and the blood drop insignia on the torso, amongst all the finely detailed rope work, was very tricky, and after the operation of their removal, the details on the weapons and the backpack were a breeze. Whacked him down on his mini scenic base, I glued his backpack on, and then it was time to decide on his weapon loadout. I knew I couldn't use his incredible power sword, Angelus Rex, as it was far too iconic as a Blood Angel's weapon, so I needed to make him start feeling like an Ultramarine. Luckily, the Blood Angel's sword attached to his arms at the wrists, so some simple hand swaps got me out of trouble, and I decided dual wielding a Paragon blade in his right hand and of course a Gladius from the power weapon set in his left hands. For shoulder pads, his stock pauldrons were insanely Blood Angels, so I simply swapped them to the Mark II Ultima and standard pad, and then for a bit of extra McCragian flair, I drilled out the top of his power pack and stole the banner pole from the new Forge World Ultramarines Praetor box, and then to really sell the Locus Hutonicus split personality, I magnetized his neck and head options so I could swap him between the helmetless Praetor head from the same box and also the absolutely epic crested Imperial Fist Praetor helm, who is also about to be cannibalized to join the Ultramarines. I absolutely love this guy, possibly my favorite Space Marine I've ever made. He's such a total badass, and I'm stoked now that he'll get double use as both Locus and Hutonicus. Up next is probably the second most popular Ultramarine from the Battle of Calth, the cheeky badass known as Ayondid Thiel. This naughty boy was on the McCrag's honor to be disciplined by Guilliman himself for devising a theoretical on how to fight other Space Marines, a way of thinking that looked less and less heretical and more foresighted by the hour. When the betrayal began, Thiel was waiting for Primarch Guilliman in his personal weapon collection. So he grabbed a bunch of fancy alien weapons off the arming racks, distributed them to a whole host of nearby Marines and Imperial Navy personnel, and charged into battle. What an absolute badass. For a super dynamic and unique pose, the Imperial Fist's Praetor was the way to go. He was a pretty simple conversion in the end. All the Imperial Fist's insignia was removed, the chest was a bit painful, but it came up well after a bit of green stuff. The sexy fist longsword he already has perfectly represents the electromagnetic longsword he plundered from Guilliman's private collection, and technically at the time of our campaign, that sword is his only weapon. But earlier in the narrative, he also steals a Kelotite friction axe from Guilliman's armory and dual wields them in God mode, and when I saw the amazing axe on the new Fafnir Rand model, I could not resist. So I whacked that onto a generic Mark II forearm, and oh man, I just love this guy. I then threw down some generic shoulder pads and gave him a helmet to represent the fact that he is in fact just a sergeant in spite of his badassery, and now he is ready to earn the respect of his Primarch. Remember, if you're planning to grab the new Age of Darkness box set or any Warhammer goodies, be they Heresy, Middle Earth, or anything in between, use my affiliate sellers down in the description. You'll get the best prices on the market in the UK, EU, US, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand with great discounts, and it sends me some dollary-doos back to support the channel as well. It is a huge help, so thank you to everyone who has been using them so far. And if you'd like the chance to win an epic reinforcement bundle for your Heresy forces, including the new Kratos battle tank, a Deimos Rhino, and a full set of the special and heavy weapons packs, like this video, subscribe, and comment down below below your favorite Space Marine character. It's a perfect set of goodies if you've just picked up the Age of Darkness box set, or you need to expand that already mighty legion. And speak of the devil, we're going to need the man himself. Now, I actually just started building out Girly Man in a fairly stock pose because the model is just so damn nice, but you know, I couldn't leave him completely vanilla, so it was time to get funky. Like all Forge World resin, I gave him a good scrub to fuck off the mold release, and then the Primarch models have a fair bit of cleanup because they are so damn gorgeous. Seriously, the Primarchs might be the best models GW makes, although that new avatar gives them a good run for their money. Now, his sword arm separates beautifully at the wrist, and after seeing that, I just couldn't help myself, and I simply had to magnetize it and give him some weapon options. I carefully drilled it out and seated a magnet in each half, and then it was time to find a way to remake his epic custom pistol, the Arbitrator. Now, on the official model, this is holstered at his back, and I didn't want to sacrifice that piece, so I needed to make a duplicate. I rummaged through my bits and settled on one of the new plastic Intercessor bolt pistols, gave it a second barrel, a second magwell, and a little bit of love, and bang! Guilliman can now blam his way into combat before going choppy chop. I actually left the rest of the model unassembled so that it could be painted in sub-assembly, and we'll see how he comes together in just a bit. With the kill squad completely modeled, it's time to get them painted. Now, I actually shot all of this content way back in February, rapidly getting over 50,000 points of models and 5 massive boards ready for filming in early April was a mental undertaking. So it was time to rope in a few friends, and when it comes to painting the Sons of Guilliman, there's no better choice than the mighty Sloan Ranger Studio. So they're all sent over to New Zealand, and while Sloan makes a start on the kill squad, it's time to begin work on the Calth ground forces. And this is where things really kick on with the savior of Calth, Remus Ventanus. The captain of the first chapter 4th company rallied the absolutely brutalized ultramarine forces on the planet of Calth and coordinated a vicious counterattack on the word bearers that ended up lasting years, taking the fight from the war-torn cities to the underground hab complexes after the surface of the planet became an irradiated wasteland when the word bearers kinda killed the sun. Yeah, they're not the nicest bunch, those loony zealot nutters. Now, in a stroke of luck, my first Ventanus from Forge World had a big bubble in one of his shoulder pads, so they sent me a replacement, which gave me a wealth of conversion parts. Now, as the star of our campaign, I decided that the savior of Calth needed 2 poses. So I smashed out one in his stock pose with a beautiful banner standing there looking all regal and Roman, and decided to let art be informed by constraint and embraced the crazy bubble on the inside of the shoulder pad and decided to turn it into battle damage from a mass reactive round, penetrating his pauldron and partially exploding as it passed through and through. All of the exterior detail is preserved, it's just insanely thin, so I widened 2 holes to be our entry and exit, bent back some more of that blowout damage, and then jammed in some Vallejo plastic putty to fill out the mass a little bit, as well as giving it some strength, and now it looks like the ceramite plate has deformed without actually blowing out Ventanus' shoulder. With my replacement model, I then decided to recreate a pose that Dan Abnett described in No Fear as Ventanus leads the infantry charge through Landshear Port to wreak utter carnage among a word-bearer's shield wall.
Ventanus is in the thick of it. Bolt gun, power sword, standard across his back. He has never felt this strong, this driven, this justified. He has never known such an entirely fearless state.
What an absolute fucking badass. Seriously, if you're digging these conversions, smash that subscribe button and check out the first installment of the Mark of Calth campaign, linked in the pinned comment. That epic scene is coming in episode 2 very, very soon. For our power sword, I'd actually saved a Gladius from our Praetorian Breacher upgrade frame, which slotted perfectly into Venti's right hand instead of the banner. I had to get more creative with his left hand, but I found the perfect matching forearm on the new Fafnir Rand plastic sculpt that GW sent me, so I pinched that and then threw in a sexy Umbra pattern bolter from the Breacher sprue to be his scavenged word-bearer bolter. I made a power sword scabbard, cutting down a sheathed Gladius from the generic Mark II power weapon frame, and then slotted his banner in behind his power back in a spot that wouldn't restrict his movement too heavily, and then with all of his other bits of details on, we have his second pose. What an absolute beast. With Ventanus complete, we have a whole cast of badass sidekicks headed up by his fellow steadfast class 4th Company Captain Lyros synants. He was a super simple build, coming together from the stripped down Ultramarines Praetor from the box set we already stole some pieces from earlier, and then it was on to the company sergeants. At first I tried to make some of these using the Invictus torsos with Mark IV arms and legs to give them a bit of separation from their subordinates, but the scale difference just didn't quite work. They had some super weird proportions, so I ended up using those Invictus torsos with Mark II pieces. Grievous was super simple, just some fancy pads, a power fist as per the book, and his bolter using arms from the power weapons frame, and then it was on to the steadfast sergeant and ultimate sidekick to Ventanus, Kaios Celaton. Now, it actually took me ages of scrubbing through the audiobook to work out what his exact loadout was.
Turning aside the power axe with a battered combat shield, whose surface decoration has been obliterated into a billion raw metals, nicks and scratches, Ventanus and Celaton fight back to back. Celaton drives a chainsword across the guard of the axe wielder.
Well, the chainsword is easy and works really well with this badass leaping pose that I'm going for, but the combat shield, where on earth am I going to get a combat shield? Then suddenly, a stroke of inspiration. I dug out my old army case from 2008 and discovered a whole treasure trove of early teenage Lachie conversions. Assault Marine riding a Termagant, anyone? My headcanon for this guy was that he wedged his axe into the Termie's nervous system like Gimli, using it to control him like a horse. 2008 Lachie, what an imagination. Anyway, here's what we're going for. The Dark Angels veteran from my old 4th edition command squad. Yoink! Thank you for your donation to the Ultramarines. Let's get this cheeky Aquila off there. We ain't no showboating Emperor's children. And boom, we have a combat shield. Adding the cape from the Synants Praetor blister, we've got a really sweet looking sergeant who's going to stand out nicely from among the crowd. Another package off to Sloan to get them painted up, and then I've got 2 very special units left. The first is a squad to represent Sergeant Vatian and his 4th Company Scouts, and I thought I'd rope in some more help for these bad boys. Now, these scouts aren't the classic novitiate-style 40k scouts, but fully fledged Legiones Astartes who specialize in reconnaissance and are represented by the gorgeous Forge World Mark IV Recon Marine set. I built these lads with some super cool options, a couple of spicy Nemesis bolt rifles, and some shotguns to keep them nice and versatile, and then it was time to rope in some gullible fool to paint them for me. Benny, paint me some Space Marines.
Okay.
So with Benny getting to work on the scouts, that completes the ground forces for Calth for the good guys, but after building that second pose of Ventanus, I realized I didn't have any word-bearer breaches for him to charge into. So it was time to hit up the Lorgar Aurelian of the Warhammer YouTubers, Ollie from Broadsword Wargaming. Now, as you guys all probably know, Ollie and I have been working on the Mark of Calth campaign together for nearly 2 years, and it has been my great pleasure to make him take command of the army he despises more than any other.
Calm down.
That's a bad answer.
What the
1 1 2 4 1 2. Oh, then yeah, okay, right.
Just to stick the knife in, I even made Games Workshop ask him to paint up the whole new box set for the Warhammer World display as the word bearers, and through the sheer indoctrinating power of the word of Lorgar, he is now 100% in love with the 17th Legion. So why not abuse his newfound ecclesiastical devotion and make him paint me some breaches? The breaches I kept super stock as they're essentially just deployed into combat, so 10 Mark III chunk boys with standard loadouts was the way to go, although Ollie had a lot of fun getting them all blinged up to suit the 17th Legion.
Oliver!
Yay, more word bearers.
Make sure you head over to Ollie and Benny's videos, linked down in the description and the pinned comments, to see the journey of those units coming together. They did some really sweet work diving into the narrative of the squads, and check out the amazing paint job that Sloan did on these absolutely gorgeous Ultramarines. I gave him the brief of following the original paint scheme just like I did in that first Age of Darkness box set video, and he did such a better job than I. If you want to see some epic close-ups of his work, his Instagram and channel are linked below. Thank you so much, man. To finally have some Sloan Ranger work in my collection is an absolute honor. If you're absolutely pumped for the Horus Heresy and our mega Mark of Calth campaign here at Zorpazorp, drop me a comment down below, smash that like and subscribe button so you don't miss all the action as it unfolds. We have so much Heresy content coming your way. I'm currently sitting on about 25 videos yet to be edited, so strap the lock in, boys and girls. Heresy is here to stay. If you're really keen to support the channel, feel free to check out my Patreon link down below, and a huge shout out to these amazing folks. I literally could not do this without you. That's it for now, folks. I'll see you in just a few days with the next Heresy update, and always remember to let the galaxy burn.
Officer of Record, start the mark.
Now, yes, I know I just nearly sent the f***ing Storm Eagle yeeting off the table. Okay, a little less gesticulation required.